Alrighty, guys. Whew, this is exciting. Belts, and Jiu Jitsu. What the hell do they mean? Are they that important? Are they completely unimportant? So many different opinions out there. A lot of people expressing their opinions, and I get like a ton of people asking me all the time, messaging me and asking me in person, like, what about this belt? And don't you think so-and-so should have a higher belt, or somebody should have a lower belt? Or so there's a lot of controversy and a lot of differing opinions on Jiu-Jitsu belts. So with this little video, I've got one, main goal in mind is basically if you're questioning and you're wanting to get your head around, okay, how should I think about belts, especially if you're thinking about grading people. Hey, like you've started up your own club and maybe you've got your first 30 adult students and that sort of thing, and you're like, okay, right, how am I grading, what sort of thing? Steve's been training with me for 18 months now. He's probably just about ready for a blue belt, but I'm not really sure. This video, I just want to give you a bit of an idea of, if I could go back in time a little bit to when I started coaching full time and doing my first gradings and that sort of thing, what I really wish I knew. So yeah, so hang around. If it's something that really interests you and you want a good idea, have a bit of a listen. The main thing that I'm going to talk about in this video is the fact that belts in Jiu-Jitsu are subjective rather than objective. So I'm not trying to say that I think people that do Jiu-Jitsu are a little bit slow. A lot of us, like myself, are. But sometimes you get our ideas in our head, and then you try to make the world fit it. So let me just explain these two words. I don't know how well you can see that. I just thought it'd be better if I wrote it on a whiteboard. Subjective basically means from your opinion. It's based on your feelings, your tastes, your opinions, or anybody else's, you know what I mean? So we've all got opinions. They're like arseholes. Everyone's got one, but most of the time they stink. And likewise for feelings and tastes, somebody might say something and you might take it and laugh, and I might be insulted by it. That's the way things work. It's subjective. That's what practically all of belts up in Jiu-Jitsu are. But let me just explain what objective is. Objective is basically the opposite of subjective. Basically, objective is if I'm presenting a situation, I'm just talking about the facts of the situation. So it's not really up for debate. When it's objective, it's kind of like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so I'll just try not to go off onto a massive tangent where I'm just rambling on about, the history of Jiu-Jitsu and why I think different belts are, because I do have a lot of opinions on that. But just to keep it nice and simple, let's look at the main things when we're going to be graded, or when you're getting graded, or when you're grading somebody. The main things we look at is obviously the obvious one there is skill. So you can go, yeah, but skill's objective, isn't it? Like, you can either do it or you can't. Well, is it really objective? Like, still a big part of the skill is still kind of subjective. Like, one person's idea of what is the most important skills to be learning first, and what skills actually represent a blue belt from, like, differentiate a white belt from a blue belt, even if, student A was the carbon copy to student B, still, the skills that might be different. One person might favor different things. So really, even as a coach, even if you're just grading from white to blue, if you're just doing it off skill, it's still just kind of that particular coach's opinion. The next thing is going to come in is there's going to be size. So a 70 kilo person is going to probably be stronger than a 60 kilo person. Maybe not, because then we have strength come into the equation. So we've got size and we've got strength, and then we've got attributes like flexibility and that sort of thing. And then how much we're improving our strength and how much we're improving our cardio. But then what about age? So somebody that's maybe 21, they're finished with their schooling or whatever, and they're just taking a year off. They might be able to train every single class of every day for a week, and they might be able to do more training in 1 year than most people can do in 4. So to say that they got to, well, whatever it is, a higher rank, maybe, nearly purple belt in like a year's worth of training where somebody didn't in 3. Yeah, but what about if the person did that in 1? So once again, we're talking about a subjective thing. So a lot of the time when people say, oh, how long did it take to get your belt? They go, how many years were you in the sport? But training once a fortnight isn't the same as training twice a day. But for some reason, people still just seem to go, oh, how long were you in the sport? Oh, 18 months. Oh, I was in the sport for 3 years. How come I didn't get it? Yeah, well, you didn't even train for one of the years. So just try to remember that everything is subjective. Same deal, like what about, well, for the sake of this video, we'll leave kids completely out of it because I did come up with a lot of my opinions from actually grading the kids and then bringing it across into the adults. I was like, oh yeah, it's the whole thing's subjective. However, what I will say is what we really want to do is we want to consider all of those things. So I think it's important to remember, like somebody that started at 10 is going to, in 20 years of training, they're really going to be like, you know, they're going to be 30 years old. So they're at their prime. They're going to be a high level black belt, even if they're not competitive, even if they're just doing it as a hobby, they're going to be an absolute killer. So that black belt that's been training for say 20 years from the time they were 10, they're going to be absolutely phenomenal at 30. However, what about if you got somebody that started at say 20 and they trained really hard and they've got through, but you know, they had time off for injuries because they started when they were 20, so maybe they, you know, found a relationship or they started a business or whatever, so they did have time off and on, but they were quite serious and they competed a fair bit locally, that kind of thing. Just in general, rolling in the gym, I can guarantee you that, let's say they were both, I don't know, 80 kilos, both similar kind of athleticism. The guy that's been training for 20 years just from the time that he was 10, he's just going to have so much more built-in muscle memory. His Jiu Jitsu is going to be so much better, smoother, and more clean. So once again, you've got to remember that if you're grading these two same people, it's a completely different thing. So once again, it's subjective. So let's just say our main considerations are going to be, let's see, where can I write it? Let's just put it in the middle here. So our main one is going to be skill, and then we've got like size and strength. And then we've got age. These tend to be, well, and in there, we really need age, and then we need weight. And then weight. But I have to harp on about it again. Look at age. I'm 40, for instance. I know a lot of people that are in their late 30s that I would consider look far more worse than me. I've also met, like physically, there's a fair few people that I've met that are years older than me, and some of them even 10 years older than me, that I'm like, far out, if I'm looking like that in 10 years, when I'm 50, I'm going to be ecstatic. That's great. So subjective and as well as like life experience and, you know, genetics and all that sort of thing come into play. Same thing with weight. You can go, oh, you know, 80 kilo person is stronger than a 70 kilo person. Yeah and no. I know some people that are under 70 kilos that would be strong, a lot stronger than athletic 90 kilo people that I know. So once again, it's your lifestyle and all that sort of thing. So the one thing, when, like, if I go back to what I was originally talking about and the goal for this video, let's say you're watching this video and you're really sort of torn and you're thinking about, okay, how do I grade? How am I going to run this grading? For say your stripes on your white belt and even up to blue belt, it's pretty cool. Like the skill acquisition is actually leaning towards the objective side, especially once you've been doing Jiu Jitsu for more than 10 years and you take it fairly seriously and you've got like a bit of a technical outlook on how moves work and that kind of thing. You will have, and if you have like that smaller gym, you've got 30 adult students, you'll know all of those people personally, and you'll easily be able to see and take into consideration all of these things, and you'll be able to go, okay, cool. you've definitely earned a stripe, you've definitely earned 2 stripes, you've got your 4 stripes, you're looking at your blue belt. That is actually fairly obvious. When we start to think about like your higher belts, and this is actually probably why this is becoming more apparent now, because Jiu Jitsu wasn't as popular. If we rewind 10 years, it was a lot of smaller gyms, and it was a lot of, you know, just people in their garage or people with smaller setups, and the coaches knew all of their students personally, they were actively competing. But now, if you come back 10 years, like a lot of those coaches had been training 15 years there, now they're like my amount of training, like 19, 20 years and 25 and 30 years of Jiu Jitsu. For them to actually roll with all of their students gets pretty tough. Also, a lot of those guys have gone from their garage to one dojo to a bigger dojo, and now they're running a gym with, like, you know, hundreds of members and kids classes, and they've got coaches and that kind of thing. So they can be a lot more stepped away. So let's just forget about those guys for the second and bring it back to like a smaller gym or somebody just starting out, maybe doing their first few gradings. Those first gradings are going to be easier. When you start to look at purple belt, brown belt, and especially like your black belt, how the hell are you going to do something that is, I would say, on the overall scheme of things, it's not that much of a big deal, but at the time of grading, well, definitely know for myself and for thousands of people that I've spoken to, each belt means a lot. I remember my blue belt feeling like 10 foot tall, like nothing in the world could hurt me. Like it was just the best. Purple belt, so much better. Brown, black, and even like though I've had my black belt now for about 5 years or so, I'm still, whenever I do occasionally do a gi class, I'm like, yeah, still, I'm proud of you, proud of that work that I did to get it. So it's more, but that again is a subjective thing. Anybody could go, oh, you can just go and do your sport. It's not as hard as wrestling, or it's not as hard as dirt bike, whatever. What I am saying too, we've got our guys that we've graded our stripes, and we've got our guys that we've maybe given our blue belt, but you've got somebody that you're thinking about coming up for a grading that you've got in, say, 8 months or something like that. You're like, okay, he's probably ready for his purple belt. But if it's all subjective, how do I give him his purple? How do I justify grading this person to purple belt in 8 months? I like to put, and this is take it or leave it, but because I know that it's all subjective, I do like to see a decent improvement in skill. I like to, you know what I mean? I like to, obviously these are subjective, age is subjective, and weight's subjective as well. So we always want to see that improvement in skill, but as we get higher in these belts, I like to know my students, and if you've got a bigger gym and you're like, putting the grading down to your coaches, that sort of thing, make sure they're thinking along these lines. But I like to know them personally and know what they're working on. So maybe they are wanting to put on a bit of, they are working on their strength outside of it. Maybe they're working on their cardio. Maybe their goal isn't really to compete or anything. Maybe their goal is to lose weight because they're, say, like, I don't know, 45. They started when they were like 42, and they're training hard, but they've got their family and that sort of thing. What I would like to see, as well as seeing that skill, as well as seeing them coming into training regularly, I would like to notice. Like, obviously I'd talk to them and I'd know, okay, let's say it's Steve and he wanted to lose 5 kilos, for instance. I would like to see him working towards that goal. So in 8 months, it's pretty reasonable to expect that if he was fairly dedicated, he would achieve that 5 kilo weight loss. So if he's told me early in the year that he wanted to lose 5 kilos and he's like, training hard, doing a lot of things and that sort of thing, I'm not going to give him his purple belt until he actually loses that 5 kilos or something else, if you know what I'm saying. I like to see people push towards goals that they're like trying to achieve. A really big one is, but you'll get like weight loss and you'll get, confidence things and that sort of thing with older students, that sort of thing. When you have students at the end of their teens and in their early 20s and that sort of thing, a big part of it's going to be just getting started, just feeling out the sport, like looking for a bit of confidence, a bit of bragging rights with their friends. But then as they start to get a bit more serious, the first thing that comes in is competition. And I've held heaps of students back for a good amount of time, purely because they told me they wanted to compete, say, 3 times this year, and it's gotten to the end of the year, and I'm like, I was actually thinking about towards the end of this year, if you kept up that training, progressing you on to the next belt. But if you actually haven't even entered the competitions or showed me that you were prepping yourself to compete at those competitions, as far as I'm concerned, you're not really working towards your self-improvement that you told me. So I'm not making up the rules for you. You're telling me what you want. That's how I like to keep it honest. I like to see people progressing and working towards their own little goals, taking ownership of their own training. It makes it so much easier when you're grading. And then also the other thing is, the big one, the really hard one to grade for is black belt. If you have all of your, like if you had students coming through from like their teens or like kids and then coming through, it's quite easy. Like if, you know, most of the time they're actually like quite good regardless of strength and weight, and their skill development, that is quite obvious. And they tend to get into their early 20s and they're, you know, around 25, 26, they're generally ready for their black belt anyway. It's quite easy. However, what can happen there is though, when you get people that are super athletic and maybe their parents are really pushing them and they've got a lot of support around them and that sort of thing, this is where you can get, if the coach hasn't actually progressed them and helped them with, say, whether it's competing or family life or little struggles and that go down, and if you're not sort of grading and talking to your students and keeping an eye on them there, then when it comes to giving them their black belt, it can be a little bit of like, I'm just kind of saying the same, the coach is standing there with their black belt and saying the exact same things that they said to them when they gave their brown belt, because this coach obviously is trying to keep the subjective, objective thing, which is how he graded to blue, which is how pretty much all coaches are grading, because it is fairly objective. But then all of the other belts and all of the stripes and all that sort of thing, keep in mind, it's purely subjective. So if you haven't actually been able to roll with your student a lot at brown belt, you really got sweet fuck all idea if they've improved enough from their black belt, especially if they're like fast improvers or that idea. If you're not actually rolling with them and feeling it, or if you're not actually fit enough to do it, or unless you have like a lot of time to put into it, it can be very difficult. Even though you know skill-wise and that they're definitely worth it, how do you justify it in your own mind? And that's where I like you to just go back, put it subjective, and then put it back on the student, or if you're watching this for yourself, put it back on yourself. Think about what the goals are that you're working towards, competition, weight loss, strength, flexibility, whatever the goals are that you're working, communicate that with your coach, ask them if you can work in. In my opinion, it just makes things like a lot more easier, a lot more flowing, but keep it at the back of your mind. Now, anytime you're watching anything and somebody says some things about belts and that sort of thing, if you just think in the back of your mind, listen to what they're saying, don't get into any arguments or anything, but just think, is what they're saying objective truth? Like, is it just based completely on facts? Or is that subjective, completely based on their opinion because of their experience? I feel like it's belts has always been a hot topic and it seems to be getting hotter for some reason, especially with the whole no gi thing. Like, I didn't go into marketing in the history and gi versus no gi or anything. I left all that for the comments below, so drop them down there and stir me up. Have I missed something? I feel like I'm missing something, so I want to do another one of these videos in maybe 12 months when I know more. But I still think subjective and objective. Let me know what you think.